What's going on, everybody? Welcome to 3 Point Lead. My name is Max Loeb, Loeb's Leads. This is a Loeb's Leads podcast, and today we are bringing you episode 6 of the NFL division breakdowns, moving to the NFC East with my New York Giants, talking about them, the Washington Commanders, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Dallas Cowboys. This whole division is really interesting because I think it's pretty top-heavy, and I'm not talking about the Cowboys and the Eagles. I think there is a separator between those two. The New York Giants and the Washington Commanders, as I'm sure you guys will see, will be at the bottom. But when we talk about the Cowboys and Eagles, there are a couple pieces of information that you guys need to know that may make you think a certain way about one of those two teams. Before we talk anything about the NFC East, though, if you guys are new, you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like this video. If you're listening on Spotify or Amazon Podcast, make sure you follow along so you don't miss the next episode. Episode 7 shows up in your app next time you're on it. If you haven't seen the first 5 episodes already, make sure you do. We went through the South, we went through the West, in both the AFC and the NFC, as well as the AFC East that just came out a little bit earlier. Let's talk about the Giants, though. We'll start with my team. Look, guys, I love what they did this offseason. Losing Saquon was tough, but I do love what they did this offseason, really beefing up front, saying we're going to win the line of scrimmage. We're going to make our own identity, our own brand of football, and we're going to run with it. We don't care what people think about it. We're going to do it. I respect that, and I like that. And I think the reality is they start 1-0. Like, I think they beat the Minnesota Vikings week 1. Sam Darnold's first start in a long time. Not in a long time. First meaningful start in a long time. I think they're a better team than the Minnesota Vikings. I think they can play some good defense. They'll get after them up front. And to be honest with you, as wild as it sounds, I trust an offseason with Daniel Jones in this offense more than I trust an offseason with Sam Darnold in this offense. So I will take the Giants week 1, but guys, that's about it for a little bit. Going to Washington week 2, I have the Commanders winning. Going to Cleveland week 3, they stand no chance. Hosting the Cowboys week 4, they stand no chance. Now, they host the Cowboys week 4 on Thursday night. So they get a mini bye next week going to Seattle. I think a very beatable team. I have the Giants winning that game. Now, week 6, you host Cincy. You're not winning that game. Week 7 is Saquon's return to the Meadowlands. He's going to have 200 yards. The Eagles are going to win that game. Week 8, you travel to Pittsburgh on Monday night. The Steelers are going to win that game. Now, you do come back and host Washington in week 9. I think that's a winnable game for the Giants. I think they win that. So they have 3 wins by week 9, which is not bad at all. But I think they lose to Carolina in week 10. Coming off a bye, I think they get Tampa Bay week 12, and they beat them. But then the rest, guys, this schedule is so tough. Travel to Dallas on Thursday, you lose. Host New Orleans off a mini bye in week 14. I do think you can win that game, but hosting Baltimore off a bye, no chance. Traveling to Atlanta, no chance. Hosting Indy, no chance. Traveling to Philly week 18, no chance. So 1-5 in the division with their only win against the Washington Commanders. 5-12, 4-5 at home, 0-10 versus teams with a winning record last year. The schedule is difficult. That's the reality. It's a difficult schedule, but you're not going to beat a team with a winning record from last year. 5-2 versus teams with losing records. So, nothing wrong with that, but you beat the teams you should beat, and then they don't have the talent and the star power to play up to teams, at least not yet. So I think the Giants finish 5-12 alongside the Washington Commanders. I think the Washington Commanders also finish 5-12. We will walk through their schedule very quickly. The week 1 matchup against Tampa Bay, I go back and forth on, but I do think Tampa Bay pulls that out. Obviously, Washington beats the Giants week 2. But week 3, you travel to Cincy for the Washington Commanders. Matchup with the LSU quarterbacks. It's a tough game to win. I think Cincy pulls that one out. Week 4, you guys know how I feel about the Arizona Cardinals. I think the Cardinals win that game. Week 5, hosting Cleveland. I don't think you have a chance. Week 6, traveling to Baltimore. I don't think you have a chance. So week 7 is the next win that this team gets against the Carolina Panthers. But then next week, you host the Bears off of a bye. I don't think you can beat the Bears off a bye. Week 9, you travel to the Giants. I think the Giants win that game. That's their one divisional game that they win. Week 10, you host the Steelers off a bye. I think the Steelers are a better team. The Steelers walk in and win. Week 11, you travel to Philly. I don't think you win that game. Now, week 12, you do get a mini bye because the Thursday night game against Philly was earlier on the week. But I think Washington, call me crazy, I think Washington pulls it out against Dallas in week 12, but loses Tennessee week 13. So the week 14 bye for the Commanders comes at a decent time. They are, what would they be here, 3-10 going into week 15. I think they do beat the Saints off of a bye. I also think they beat the Eagles, hosting the Eagles in week 16, but I don't think they beat Atlanta, and I don't think they beat Dallas the last 2 weeks. Now, a 3-3 team in the division, obviously that puts them above the Giants if they're 5-12, but a 4-5 team at home, 1-7 on the road, 2-8, versus teams with a winning record last year, 2-6 versus playoff teams from last year. A decent strength of schedule, but I don't think this team is anything special. I will say I'm very excited to see Terry McLaurin break out. I think this is his big year. We'll talk about our award picks at the very end of the episode, but I think this is his big year. He finally has a quarterback, at least with some wherewithal, some consistency. I do think that offense is going to be more fun to watch, but I worry about the defense. And I think it's a carbon copy of the Dallas Cowboys, but it's not the Dallas Cowboys' best players, and that's the issue here. And We're going to move to the Dallas Cowboys. I don't really know how you guys are going to feel about this, but we're going to walk through the schedule. It's a lot harder than people realize. I think the Cowboys will lose more games than people realize. They see last year, they were a good team. They were fighting for the division at the end of the year. I think there is maybe not a glaring hole with their run defense, but there is a hole with their run defense that needs to be addressed. So I look at them going to Cleveland week 1. I don't think they win that game. I don't think it's a crazy thing to expect them to lose to the Browns at home week 1, dog pound rocking. Week 2, hosting the Saints, I do think they win that one. But week 3, hosting Baltimore, I think Baltimore is a better team on both sides of the ball, so I will take the Ravens. Week 4, you beat the Giants. Then off your mini bye, you go to Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh wins at home. Week 6, you host the Lions off of their full bye. I think the Lions win that. So you're moving into your week 7 bye as the Dallas Cowboys at 2-4. As wild, 2-4. As wild as that sounds, I think it's the reality. Week 8, though, they travel to San Francisco. I think the Niners win that game. Week 9, they have to travel to Atlanta. I think the Falcons win that game. So the reality is the Dallas Cowboys, you're starting 2-6, but as the season goes on, they do still have some tough opponents. They will win some games. Week 10, hosting Philly. I think they wind up splitting with Philly, but they beat Philly in Dallas. Week 11, hot, coming off a Philly win on Monday night. I think they beat Houston, but a shorter week coming next week against Washington, who's coming off their mini bye. Like I said, Washington beats them. Host the Giants, you beat them. On Thursday, mini bye, you host Cincinnati. Week 14, you beat them. Week 15, you should beat the Panthers. Week 16, you should beat the Buccaneers. Week 17, you travel to Philly, and then you lose that game. And then week 18, you host the Commanders. I don't think there's anything unreasonable about the stuff that I said, but if you guys weren't really paying close attention and you don't know what their record is, it's 9-8. It's 9-8. It does put them in the playoffs. They are my 7 seed, but it's 9-8. It's crazy. It's crazy to think. And I think there's legitimately 10 losable games on the schedule. Like, you'll get Philly twice. You can lose both those games. You can lose to any of the AFC North teams. So that's 4 right there. Lions, Texans, Niners, Falcons. Like, this is a really tough schedule, guys. A really tough schedule. 7-2 versus teams at home, and 6-1 versus teams with losing records from last year. So like, you're beating the teams you should beat. But there are some tough games. Playoff teams from last year, 3-6 against them. Dallas is they're going to struggle a little bit this year, guys. I think you're going to be surprised to how many games they wind up losing. Now, my number 1 seed in the NFC East, and spoiler, my number 1 seed in the entire conference is the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they got exponentially better on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the secondary. Obviously, they lose Jason Kelce on the offensive side of the ball, but you're sliding Cam Jurgens, a really, really good interior offensive lineman, inside and putting Mekhi Becton at guard. Like, their offensive line is still going to be really good. And all of a sudden, you got a dynamic running back now. Like, this team is really good, better coordinators on both sides of the ball. I think this is the best team in the NFL, to be honest with you. Week 1, you beat Green Bay. Week 2, you beat Atlanta. Week 3, I do have them losing to New Orleans. I think they come back down to earth a little bit of growing pain. But week 4, beat Tampa. Bye week, off a bye, hosting Cleveland. You beat Cleveland. You beat the Giants. You go to Cincy. You beat the Bengals. Nothing insane that I've said so far, right? I don't think anybody can stop me. I think the Bengals are good, but I think the Eagles are better. Week 9, host Jacksonville. You can win that game. Week 10, I do have them traveling to Dallas and losing. But week 11, host Washington. Good. You should win that game. That's a Thursday game. You get a mini bye next week against LA. You win that game. Week 13, I think they lose to the Ravens on the road. The Ravens play up to NFC teams. It's kind of wild they do, but they do. Week 14, you should beat the Panthers at home. Week 15, you should beat the Steelers at home. Week 16, you travel to Washington, and I have Washington win that game. But the last 2 weeks, hosting the Cowboys and the Giants, you win both of those games. All of a sudden, you're sitting at 13-4, guys. 4-2 in the division, 9-3 in the conference, undefeated at home, 8-2 versus teams with a winning record from last year. It's a really good team. There is no other way to slice that this is a really good team, top to bottom, depth-wise, both sides of the ball. Special teams is obviously very good too, but this, to me, is the best team in the NFC, potentially the best team in the NFL. I think there's so many things you have to worry about when you're defending this team, and then when you're on offense trying to score on them, they can attack you in a lot of different ways, and all of a sudden they have a secondary now. Not a lot of teams are going to beat the Eagles, and the fact that I even have the Saints as one of those teams is mind-blowing to me, but I don't think any team in the NFL wins 14 games this year. So we'll go 13-4 for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that's very rational. So we have the Eagles, then the Cowboys, both making the playoffs atop the NFC East, and then the Commanders at 5-12, the Giants at 5-12, Commanders over them with a tiebreaker below them in the NFC East. Let's talk about our award predictions for this division, though. Award predictions, we got sleeper, rookie of the year, breakout player, offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year. I already talked about my breakout player, so I don't need to say much on Terry McLaurin, but Terry McLaurin, I think, finally has some consistent quarterback play. No Jahan Dotson. There is a number 2 option. It's Diami Brown, but like I don't think he demands as much attention or targets as Dotson does. I think Terry's going to get peppered this year. I love Terry this year. I think he's going to have an awesome year. Fantasy people, I think Terry's going to be really good for your teams, but Terry McLaurin, breakout player of the year, just based solely off of volume. I think, again, the quarterback play is going to help, but having a number one option on the outside is something Jayden Daniels loves to do, loves to use. Did it with Malik Neighbors. I think Terry's going to have a big year, but we'll move to the other players because the other guys are going to surprise you, I think. My sleeper, nobody has talked about. I have not heard one single soul talk about this player. It's Ezekiel Elliott. Yes, Ezekiel Elliott. I know it sounds crazy. Zeke's a little bit older. He's not as spry as he once was, but I think if you turn on that film from New England last year, there are some really good things. I think he can still move really well. I think he can still make people miss in space. Is the breakaway speed there? No, he's older. But I think Ezekiel Elliott is going to become a mainstay in that run offense. Like, I think he's going to get 12 to 15 touches a game. Probably some goal line touches in a high-scoring offense, too. I think he can contribute in the pass game. He did that really well in New England. Am I going to guarantee 1,000 yards? No, I don't think that's realistic. But I will tell you, looking at this team, looking at what they want to do offensively, they're going to have to run the ball. He is going to be their 3 yards in a cloud of dust guy. He's going to have a couple big games, couple multi-touchdown games. I think people are just throwing him to the side. I love Zeke this year. I think Zeke is getting in for a bigger year than people think. I'm not just going to say flat out big year, but bigger than people think. Rookie of the year, Malik Neighbors. You could go Jayden Daniels, but Malik Neighbors is the one I have my eyes on. I think he's electrifying. I think it's really clear to see from the Giants preseason games, they're going to do everything they can to get him the ball in different ways, whether it's, one-on-one, taking a shot down the sidelines, in the screen game, jet sweeps. He's going to have the ball in his hands nonstop. And I think he's going to put up 1,200 plus through the air this year, regardless of his quarterback. I think he, as wild as it is to call rookie quarterback proof, like, if he can do certain things with Daniel Jones, he can do it with a lot of quarterbacks. So I think he's pretty much quarterback proof. Fantasy players, again, love this guy, but Malik Neighbors is my rookie of the year in the division. Defensive player of the year is still Micah Parsons. I mean, the way he affects the game, the way he gets after the quarterback is really special. Not a lot of players in the NFL can replicate that, but nobody in the NFC East can replicate it. That's for sure. I do think Brian Burns is going to have a good year, but he's not at the level that Micah Parsons is. And I think it's really clear to see when you cut on tape of Parsons that he is so dynamic in everything he does, and not just getting after the quarterback. He can help in the run game really, really well too. He can just blow plays up, help his teammates rally too. So Parsons, by far the best player defensively in this division. I think he wins Defensive Player of the Year. And then Offensive Player of the Year, it's hard to pick anybody but Saquon, right? You can pick CeeDee Lamb. I think it's really hard to replicate what he did last year, but Saquon Barkley, who I didn't think looked bad last year, now running behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. To me, that's really scary as a fan who, loves the Giants, but has to play the Eagles twice a year. I think he could have, he's only projected like 1,000 rush yards right now, which is crazy. I will double check that number, but he could have 1,500 plus, and it wouldn't surprise me. Saquon Barkley is projected 1,000.5 rush yards. That's it. 1,000.5 on Better Picks. And you can join with code LEADS, get your first deposit matched up to $250. It's my favorite way to play fantasy sports. You can pick more or less on your favorite players. I love Saquon. I don't know if he's my full favorite player because he's on the Eagles now, but I am 100% picking more on 1,000.5 rush yards for a guy that's the mainstay of an offense. Are you kidding me? Running behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Are you kidding me? With an offensive coordinator that wants to run as many plays as possible. Are you kidding? Saquon is going to have an enormous year. He's my offensive player of the year in this division. Saquon, offensive player of the year. Micah Parsons, defensive player of the year. My breakout player, Terry McLaurin, rookie of the year. Malik Neighbors, my sleeper. I know it's wild, but Ezekiel Elliott. Those are my 5 AFC East awards. I appreciate you guys watching and listening. Again, if you're new, make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe. Be on the lookout for episode 7 and 8. The next day, we will be talking about the Western divisions, the AFC and the NFC West, the Wild, Wild West, at least in the NFC. But I'm very excited to talk about those. I appreciate you guys tuning in. See you next time. God bless.